just when I don't have the time to think about it now, because communication is it's only about women. There was one tonight because it was getting canceled yesterday.
May I please invite everyone to come to the front for a family picture? Thank you.
Excellencies, dear participants and dear friends, a very warm welcome to all of you to this high-level women's breakfast. The world is watching us. The Alliance is taking important decisions for the future as Russia continues its war of aggression against Ukraine, bringing death and destruction to the heart of Europe. At this historic moment for transatlantic security, when we make Ukraine and the Alliance even stronger, we also make our bonds stronger. Following the successful gathering of women ministers at last year's summit in Madrid, today we are getting again together to contribute to this discussion. This is a space that we have gained and that we can all be proud of. Because leadership matters, and women's leadership matters, and we would like to see more women across the Alliance, even among NATO's leaders. But how can we leverage women's leadership? We have a collective responsibility to do more. We are here making the change that we seek, leading by example and inspiring women and girls to join us now and in the future. As we know, you can't be what you cannot see. Life is showing us how leadership manifests itself in a variety of ways, from politics to civil society. And this is why I'm particularly glad to have with us today a representative from civil society. Your strong leadership has paved the way for women's political representation and participation in peace and security matters. And you continue to be at the forefront of the women, peace and security agenda every day. In this critical time for our security and for international peace and stability, as we are facing multiple security challenges, our voices and leadership are vital. It is only through our diversity and inclusivity that we can get a comprehensive understanding of the world and find the right solutions for longer-lasting and more sustainable peace. This is why we are establishing here this unique space to exchange on imperative issues to transatlantic security. NATO is an alliance of democracies based on our common values, and at the same time we are also building a new alliance between women leaders, political and non. Leadership matters, and I'm committed to continue to create and promote such spaces for dialogue. It is together that we can expand and enhance women's voices in peace and security. This summit is making Ukraine stronger as we set out a vision for its future and reaffirm that Ukraine will become a member of NATO. It is only with the inclusion of women's leadership and voices that this support will bring the change and results we want to achieve. I would like to thank Lithuania and all those who have worked hard to make this event happen. And it is now with great pleasure that I give the floor to Victoria Chmilytė-Nielsen, Speaker of the Seimas of the Republic of Lithuania. Victoria, the floor is yours.
Good morning to this distinguished audience. I'm so glad that we are meeting here today for this early working breakfast to discuss how we can empower women in the field of international security and foreign policy. I'm grateful to the NATO Secretary General's Special Representative for Women, Peace and Security, Ms. Irene Felin, for inviting me to co-host this breakfast and continue the tradition of convening women ministers for a special discussion. The topic of empowering women matters, as the credibility of the international structures depends, among other things, also on who is at the helm of leading them. Despite that I'm addressing this distinguished audience, the fact is that decision-making and priority setting, especially in the foreign policy realm, remain largely in the hands of men. This is especially true of non-democratic countries, which underlines the fact that democracy and gender equality correlate with one another and form a mutually strengthening relationship. I firmly believe that by taking up leadership positions in such men-dominated areas as international policy, as defense, you, female leaders, do not only realize your own potential, pave the way to others, give example and inspiration to women in non-democratic societies, but also reinforce democracy. Today there is a stronger sense than ever that democracies have to work together more closely, as autocratic regimes do a very good job of putting their efforts together. But I would also call for more solidarity and cooperation among women. There is a widespread attitude that women tend to be more diplomatic, more inclined to resolving conflicts peacefully, perhaps even less ambitious than men. But I would argue that the defining feature of female leadership, be it at the grassroots level or in distinguished positions, is courage. We do not take up leadership positions lightly, but when we do it well, and there are no sacrifices that we are not willing to make. Take concrete examples. The democratic example of Belarus 2020 democratic movement, spearheaded by free women. Svetlana Tsikhanovskaya today is among us. Take Iranian protests. Young women became the symbol of it. Many sacrificed their lives for it. Take Ukrainian women. They are fighting alongside on the front line together with men. They are performing miracles of public diplomacy. They are heading civil movements. I know that we are talking on the second day of the NATO summit, and it is tempting to go into a discussion on the results of the first day. But let me say just this. Let's just make a commitment that the decisions from yesterday are just a stage in a long process, and we will double our efforts to help Ukraine, to make sure that those women who are suffering and putting enormous weight on their shoulders will get as much help as we can offer them, being in the privileged positions that we are. So I would like to take this opportunity to call us not just for a theoretical discussion on women's leadership, but for a discussion on very practical steps on how we can do more than before. Thank you.
To invite Olga Stefanishina to join us. Thank you, Olga, for finding the time to be with us. That's very important for this things, for all of us. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Irene. Thank you, colleagues. Many well-known faces. We've been meeting with many of you, discussing various things. Of course, here the major discussion has been taking place yesterday, and we have already seen a decision of the leaders. And I probably want to start with the words of strong gratitude to every ally, which is everybody almost around the 32 who have been really standing strong for us. I probably want to be in a role to represent all the women in war. So we can speak, part of my job is also covering the gender equality issues, but with the beginning of the full-scale war, it has totally different angle, surviving the women, the families, most of the women who have been displaced, and also tackling the issues related to the war crimes against women committed by Russian army as part of the military tactics. And we have been discussing it in different circles many times. Probably, I think that the experience, the very sad experience now Ukraine has, is a unique one for a largest country in Europe facing the war, with hundreds and hundreds of women, men, and elderly people who faced the sexual violence. millions of Ukrainian women who had to leave the country with their children and to be split with their family. Now, 500 days after the beginning of the full scale of war, we feel a lot of consequences of this horrible war directly related to women. But at the same time, we did a lot in years before the full-scale war as part of the Women, Peace and Security Resolution, the action plans, our joint work within the alliance to leave no barriers for women in the armed forces. And now we have the situation with almost 40,000 Ukrainian women serving in the armed forces, and many of them are on the senior positions, and many of them are on the front line. So we literally have no barriers for women in the armed forces, which is not the case for the, let's say, post-Soviet army format and the thinking. So, but there's like a number of things I want to bring your attention to. That with 24th of February, we have been treating this day as the day which has lifted any gender barriers, because it wasn't about whether you have this or that position. It wasn't about whether you're a woman or a man. It was whether you wake up and stand up for your duty. And I can only confirm that none of Ukrainian women had abandoned that duty. I think it's really important. And I think that when we're talking about the decisions which have been taken yesterday, we're really sorry that that's been very much behind the discussion and the wording. It wasn't that much about the substance, and what we're ending up with we're ending up with a set of conditions for Ukraine to become better than the best. I just want to bring to your attention a couple of comparisons that we heard a lot of signals that nobody wanted to irritate Russian Federation. Nobody wanted to be clear, those who were not in a position to think so, to clear in terms of the decisions related to Ukraine's invitation to join NATO, because it might affect the future negotiations, and Ukraine might be traded in the issues related to the ending of this war with Russia. We heard many things, but it sounds very ridiculous to us, because we are talking about the country which nearly failed to reach any of the declared goals of the war. We were not believed when we were showing our resolve. We heard that Ukraine will fall within 3 days. This didn't happen. We heard that Ukraine will not be able to transform and reform itself while the war is raging on. We were not believed. But when Europe stood united for Ukraine and made a decision to grant Ukraine candidate status, you saw that we managed to run the country fully, regardless of the war, to prepare everything related to accession in the bombshells throughout the country. But you didn't believe us. And when we were saying that Russia, in fact, is really weak, that less than within 24 hours, a small group of private military officers managed to undermine the whole chain of statehood in Russian Federation and nearly find nobody in Kremlin, we were not believed. So probably it's part of the common belief and common understanding that it's better to see Russia as a huge and strong power than recognize that it's relative, that it's really weak. So there are many things on the discussion, and I just wanted to ask that keep on believing Ukraine. And when Ukraine says that it's really important that at this particular moment of time, when the hardest counteroffensive process and measures are taking place, when the people are not able to come back to their countries, where we have survived the winter without light and water, when we still opening the survivor centers around the country, helping women, men, and other people in everything they might need to survive from the war. And when we reform ourselves, when we keep the institutions running, when we keep the social, medical, everything working and operational, when we keep the banking sector running, the financial sector running generally in the country, when we reform our anti-corruption institutions and establishing the judicial institutions in the times of war and make it operational, just believe us when we say we want the decisions that would really change the situation in Ukraine, that will really bring morale. And I'm sure that we might be sorry of some things which have not been done, of something that Ukraine expected, when we will be successful in ending the war and bringing all Europe and all Ukraine to victory, when we will keep on running the country, showing that we are strong despite of everything. Probably it's also seen with the very fact that the first area of responsibility I've been covering related to women's never stopped being effective. All the infrastructure we managed to have been effective. All the women's received support in the shelters. All the women's have been standing on the squares of the European cities and the cities across Atlantic, saying they need support, they need messages from the whole world, the messages of unity. So I'm really grateful to every one of you around this table. I know that many of you step up and did the best you could. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it's worse. Ukraine and us as leaders, as political officials, as women in Ukraine, as mothers, there's no negative feeling. It's just we feel that we could have done more, and it really could have helped us back in Ukraine. It was needed for us, not against Russia, not because it's just the wish list. It was so much needed. And the first information from our side we were receiving from the front line yesterday. So there's still a lot of communication, a lot of things to be done, a lot of things to be enforced in the decisions taken yesterday. And we hope this will not become another element of the historic uncertainty. You know Ukrainians, you know us. We are for certainty when it comes to the victory, when it comes to the membership of Ukraine in EU and NATO, when it comes to our territorial integrity and sovereignty, because we all know what is at stake, and it's something beyond only Ukraine. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Olga. Thank you for your words, your strength, and for leading by example every day as a woman, as a political leader, as a colleague, as a friend. We are all with you.